I'm a 54-year-old man who got divorced from my 48-year-old wife 8 years ago. Since then, my 28-year-old daughter cut all contact with me and sided with her mother without even asking how I felt. Even though the divorce happened nearly a decade ago, it has taken me a long time to accept how things turned out and make peace with my life. My ex-wife tried to completely destroy my reputation, but the hardest part was being completely shut out from my daughter's life. I really love her, and losing that connection was more painful than anything else. She was an adult at the time, so there was no way for me to be in her life unless she wanted me to be, and she seemed certain about choosing her mother over me. I don't have any family of my own, except for my mom who had Alzheimer's, so the whole ordeal was one of the worst things I've ever experienced. I tried to contact my daughter several times after the divorce, but she was determined to stay on her mom's side and didn't want to hear my side of the story. My ex reached out to me and threatened to sue for harassment if I didn't leave my daughter alone. That made things clear for me, so I stopped contacting her. For the past 8 years, I've focused on taking care of my mom and advancing my career. I've had a few casual relationships, but trusting someone again has been tough after my divorce. That's been my life for nearly a decade. Sorry if I seem like a downer. The reason I'm writing this post is that my daughter recently reached out to me after all this time. I was over the moon, thinking she finally understood the divorce wasn't solely my fault. It was especially comforting since my mother had recently passed away, and I've been dealing with that grief alone, craving some family and comfort. A few months after my mom passed away, I got a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I heard a woman's voice on the other end. I didn't know it was my daughter and didn't even recognize her voice because it had been so long since we spoke. I was quite shocked when she introduced herself. She said she saw on Facebook that her grandma passed away and wanted to check up on me. I was taken aback. I didn't even know she kept tabs on me online and thought it was sweet of her. I thanked her for calling and said I was doing all right and told her that I missed her. We talked for a bit, and she said that if I wanted to meet and actually catch up in person, she would like that. I was extremely happy and agreed immediately. We decided to meet at my house over the weekend. I was really excited about meeting her after all these years, so I am writing this post to share my excitement with anyone who might be reading. I hope we can rebuild our relationship again, or at least get to know each other. My daughter came over to have dinner with me because I wanted to cook for her. I was nervous and excited when I first opened the door. I absolutely didn't recognize her because it's been nearly a decade since I last saw her, and she was just a little girl back then. We started talking, and even though it was a little awkward at first, I think we both opened up after a while. She told me about her life and what she does for work, and I told her about my life. After dinner, we finally acknowledged the elephant in the room. I asked her why she never listened to my side of the story during the divorce and automatically chose her mom. I admitted that her mother was more present because she was a stay-at-home mom while I worked long hours in construction. Still, I always tried to spend as much time as possible with my daughter. My daughter then said she regrets how things turned out. She was too young to think things through and got manipulated by how her mom made things sound. My ex-wife painted me as the ultimate bad guy who didn't care about anyone but himself. Since my daughter never got to hear my side of the story, she never questioned her mom. We talked more about this, and things were going well until she finally revealed why she was there. After talking for hours, I asked her what made her reach out to me after all these years. She looked uncomfortable, so I told her she could be honest with me. She said she had been keeping tabs on me through Facebook. When she found out her grandmother had died, she thought lawyers would contact her about her inheritance. When no one did, she decided to reach out to me personally. She wanted to give me some time and space to grieve, but she recently got engaged, and could really use some money for the wedding expenses. I felt like I was getting punched in the gut. Honestly, I thought that after all these years, my prayers were finally answered, and I could have a family again. But it turns out she never cared for me in the first place. This was all just a way for her to get her inheritance. The funniest thing is, it's not even her inheritance legally. It's all mine. If only she wasn't such a terrible daughter to me, she would definitely end up with most, if not all of it. I don't care about money. I never have. I live in a house of my own, don't have any expensive hobbies, and mostly buy my clothes from Target. Even if the inheritance wasn't in question, I wouldn't have minded helping out with her wedding at all. If she had just reached out nicely instead of trying to take advantage of me, I would have been happy to help. But she only cared about the inheritance. All of this was running through my mind at the same time. I somehow kept my composure and asked if that was all she wanted. She got defensive, saying the inheritance was secondary and her real goal was to connect with me. She said she would never forgive herself if she didn't reach out while her grandmother was alive. She confessed that she'd wanted to reach out for years but lacked the courage, fearing I wouldn't forgive her for kicking me out without an explanation. She claimed her mom manipulated her, but I could see from her panicked look that she was trying to smooth things over for forgiveness. I wondered if she was just after the money. I asked how she knew about the inheritance. She said that a couple of years before the divorce, she was visiting my late mother, who told her she wanted her to inherit everything left by my father. As the only grandchild, it made sense then. I have no siblings, and my marriage was fine at that time. I understood why my mother might have said that. If the divorce hadn't happened, or if my daughter hadn't abandoned me for years, the money would have been hers. The idea that she only cared about the money and was giving me false hopes was crushing. I was devastated but tried not to show it. I thought the best way to test her intentions was to tell her there was no money to inherit. When I asked how much she expected, her guess showed she'd put some thought into this. I then told her that her grandmother had left everything to me years ago, and I planned to use the money to start a business, so I couldn't help her out. I offered a few $1,000s for wedding expenses instead. Her disappointment confirmed my worst fears. She said she appreciated my offer, but as the only grandchild, she deserves some of the inheritance because it's her grandma's money. I told her I wished I could help, but my decision was final. She wasn't happy with the amount I offered, and she turned red with anger. She demanded I reconsider, but I stuck to my decision. That's when she showed her true colors, saying she should have known I'd always be the selfish person her mother claimed I was, and that she's glad I'm alone. Her words were hurtful, but I was prepared for this reaction. Before she could say more, I stopped her and said I should have known she was her mother's daughter, only reaching out for favors. I pointed out how disgusting it was to use my grief to manipulate me. She tried to respond, but I laughed and told her that if she hadn't blocked me years ago, she would have known about her grandmother's condition and might have gotten most of the inheritance. This left her baffled, and she asked what I meant. I told her to unblock me so I could resend all the texts that went undelivered. She did unblock me, and I forwarded the messages where I begged her to reconnect and informed her about her grandma's Alzheimer's diagnosis. It broke my heart that my mom often asked to see her granddaughter, but couldn't because of her. After reading the messages, my daughter looked ashamed and apologized. She claimed her grandma would want her to have a share of the inheritance, and that it was unfair of me to punish her. She said she was young and didn't know better during the divorce, and now she genuinely wanted to rebuild our relationship. I told her that if money determined our relationship, then maybe it's better if we don't have one. I wanted to believe her about rebuilding our relationship, but I couldn't. I said I'd consider giving us another chance, but the inheritance was out of the question. She left my house in anger, and I didn't stop her. Since then, I've talked to friends. Most agree I did the right thing, but one close friend said I should consider giving her some money since I don't really care about it. I should just let it go and let my daughter have some of it if it means having family in my life. I don't agree with this, but ever since it was suggested, I can't get it out of my head. Should I give my daughter part of my inheritance? Update 1. Hi there, this post got way more responses than I expected. Thanks for your advice and opinions. It gave me the perspective I needed. I'll start by answering the most common question: what happened during the divorce? I haven't talked about it for years, but here goes. My wife and I were married for 23 years. You'd think after all that time she wouldn't be able to stab me in the back, but she did. I found out she was cheating on me with multiple men for years before I finally discovered it. When I found out, I was devastated. I didn't know how to confront her, so I started drinking heavily and sleeping around. I nearly destroyed my life. We fought a lot, and I guess that, along with my drinking, made it easy for her to manipulate my daughter into taking her side. After nearly a year of living like that and being separated, we finally confronted each other and got divorced. My ex-wife was a journalist and a local celebrity. She used her influence to try to destroy my reputation and almost succeeded. After the divorce, it took me a long time to quit drinking and get back to my normal life. My daughter abandoning me didn't help at all. I'll admit that when I found out about my ex's affairs, I wasn't present as a parent. Even during the separation and for a year or so after the divorce, I kept to myself and wasn't there for my daughter. Once I stopped drinking and got my life together, the first thing I did was reach out to her and apologize, but she refused to listen and blocked me everywhere. I thought giving her time would help, but 8 years later, our relationship is worse than ever. Now about my mom's inheritance. Technically, the money belonged to my father. My grandparents were both doctors and bought property all around the city. Most of it was rented out and brought in a lot of money. Dad passed away when I was 21 and left everything to Mom. After she passed away, I received everything as her sole heir. My wife didn't get anything in the divorce except alimony until she remarried a few years ago. So my daughter never owned any of it. She knew her grandma owned property, but I never touched that money because my construction business was enough to live comfortably. I hope that answers your questions. My daughter hasn't reached out to me since that night, and I don't think she will. It's clear she only put up with everything for the inheritance. Now that it's off the table, I don't expect to see her again. I'm upset about it, but I know not to expect too much from people. Thanks for the support. Maybe it's time for me to start dating again and find companionship instead of waiting for ghosts from my past to come around. Update 2. It's been quite a week. I thought my last update would be the end, but life had other plans. I had just gotten home from work and was thinking about going out with some friends when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there she was, my worst nightmare. She had changed her hair and lost some weight, so it took me a second to recognize her, but it's hard to forget someone you were with for decades. Seeing her was a shock. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there. She asked if we could talk, and although I was hesitant, I didn't want her to stand at my door, so I invited her in. It was awkward, as you can imagine. We made small talk, and then she said there were things she needed to tell me. She said our daughter reached out to her about the inheritance. I kind of saw that coming. She said she understood the divorce was hard on me and admitted she took things further than she should have. I scoffed, but she ignored it. She said I shouldn't punish my daughter for what happened between us. She repeated things my daughter had said, like being very young at the time, and how I can't resent her for choosing her mother over me. I stopped her right there and said I no longer hold any resentment towards anyone. Even if I did, it wouldn't be towards our daughter. I told her I was hurt realizing that after all these years, she only reached out to her father because of the possibility of getting money. I explained the same thing to my daughter. If she had tried to reconnect earlier, she would have ended up with the inheritance. My ex tried to defend herself, but I told her my decision was final. If we were just going to go in circles, we were wasting everyone's time. I mentioned I had plans and suggested that if there was nothing else to discuss, she should probably leave. She nodded, apologized for bothering me, and left. After she left, I sat there in disbelief. I never expected to see her again, let alone have a conversation in my home. It was strange and brought up a lot of old memories I would rather forget. I went out with friends to try and forget about it. So that happened, and I needed to get it off my chest. Thanks for reading if you're still here. Update 3. This afternoon I was at work when I got a call from my daughter. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me. Right away, I told her that if this was about the inheritance, there was no point in having a conversation. She said she wanted to talk about something else. She apologized, saying she should have done things differently, and asked if I would forgive her and give our relationship another chance. She even invited me to her wedding. I was taken aback. I asked if she was sure, and she said yes. She told me to take some time to think about it and let her know if I'd be there. I said all right, and we hung up. Now I'm really confused. Part of me is overjoyed at the thought of being at her wedding, but I can't shake the feeling that this might be a way for her to get on my good side and eventually get the inheritance. However, if she's genuine, I don't want to sabotage my chance at being in her life. If I say no and she never reaches out again, I could hardly blame her. I'd appreciate some advice if anyone can help. Update 4. I've decided to go to the wedding. Many of you said that attending the wedding couldn't do any harm, and that makes sense. I don't have to do anything in return for being invited. No, I'm not in the wedding party. I'll just be a guest. I'm fine with that because going from someone she hasn't spoken to in 8 years to walking her down the aisle is a big leap. I hope this is the start of a new chapter and that we can build something